Welcome to Get Moving TV. I'm Dr. Chris Landon, and I serve as your host. Yeah, the funniest things happen. Ventura County, it's remarkable the people we find just around the corner. And my next guest is the husband of someone I work with. What husbands do, and he kind of got dragged along, all these girls in their beautiful summer dresses, finally getting a chance to eat. And so I said, I really like knowing what husbands do, so I have something to talk about. And what she told me was a little more than just working at the gas station and so on. So Miguel Gonzales here. So you notice there's something in between us, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But what I wanted to start with is just welcome. How long have you been living in Ventura County?
Would say a couple of years now.
So where'd you come from? Any particular city you were born in?
I was grown up in this small town called Porterville, California.
Oh, sure.
So a little bit kind of by Bakersfield, Fresno area. So I grew up there.
Inspiring piece of California. Hot and
where cows come from.
Yes. So did you go to school locally then at Cal State? Whatever would be there?
No, I always wanted to do cartoons for a living, but I wasn't really sure how to go about it. So I think in high school I started to do my research, and then there was this school called Cal Arts in Valencia. So I started preparing my portfolio for the school, and then I ended up getting accepted, and I got in and did my 4 years in Cal Arts.
Downhill from there. So a lot of us, I used to rat fink things like Big Daddy Ross in my school days. So what kind of things got you into Cal Arts? Because you must have had some talent even before going to Cal Arts.
Yeah, I always just loved drawing as a kid, and I was always like checking out books and drawing from the illustrations. So I would just check out books and draw from them. So I kind of got labeled as the artist in the classroom, and then you kind of just have to be good at art after that. So I kind of just kept at it. And then one day at the time, I had a girlfriend at the time, and I was just going to become an art teacher, a professor. So that day I kind of told her, hey, I kind of want to do cartoons, And she was like, cool, go ahead. Let's go ahead, do it. So then she kind of like pushed me, and I kind of found Cal Arts and kind of went downhill from there.
Well, behind every great man, there's a great woman pushing. So I'm glad she pushed you towards that. So at Cal Arts, do a lot of cartoonists come out of there?
Yeah, so a lot of the big, names came, from Cal Arts. So the creator of SpongeBob, the creator of Regular Show. So a lot of these people come from the school. So that was one of the things that, grabbed my attention. I was like, oh, all these creators are coming from this, one school. They must be teaching something or doing something well. So I guess the history behind Cal Arts is that Roy Disney and his brother started it. So they needed a school to train animators. So they have that history behind it.
Yeah, and it's one of those, here, they used to do, kind of be a finishing school for that, and then everything went digital. So somehow how did you make that, maybe you are the digital generation for all I know.
It was weird because I feel like I was that generation where, we were still learning traditional, but they introduced all the CG stuff as well. So during our junior year, we had to learn CG, but we also learned the traditional techniques as well. So I'm capable of doing both.
So watch old Disney films, and then, as a documentary about how they're done, they're drawing Mickey Mouse slowly moving his hands. So did CG change that around?
I would say so. But CG is more like a puppet that you're moving in the computer. And traditionally, you're actually drawing everything, right? So I think CG is a little easier because you just focus on the performance. You don't have to draw the thing again. You just kind of like move the puppet around in the computer. So
when kids go to school, you're exactly right. It's who you go to school with and who your buddies are, and by the way, hey, I met Miguel. And any wild things happen at school that would have made you
Uh,
get thrown out of school or thrown into school, or?
There was one time where the Annie's Awards, it's like a, where they give out, awards like this, and there was an after party, and the voice of SpongeBob was happening to sit right next to us, and my friend and I were just drinking, and I tapped his beer, and the beer started flowing up in the air, and we got, SpongeBob and his crew soaked in beer. So sometimes I see him at work, and I've never told him about it, but one day maybe I'll ask him, hey, do you remember that kid that dropped beer on you and your guest at that Annie Award show?
Yeah,
But
that'll get his attention.
yeah, he probably punched me in my face.
So that's interesting. So there's a SpongeBob puppet, I guess. And so how do you match up the emotion that he has to try and get it in his voice acting, because he's a voice actor, and then match that up so that it still gets that same emotion across?
In the drawings? Or
Yeah, in the
for
drawings.
animation?
Yeah. So so people are still drawing? Oh my God.
Yeah, in TV, SpongeBob, the show is still traditionally made, so they still draw paper.
And so how do you go about picking? You hear SpongeBob's voice. So how do you get that across in an illustration? Is it eyebrows? It's mouth? Do you learn the same things that
Yeah, we
actors
learned.
learn?
Yeah,
167 muscles in the body, and here's what. 'Cause I remember my friends who were actors looking at the pictures of the 167 emotions and every muscle that was there, and trying to do that, and then.
some of us have like mirrors in our office, so we just poke over and look at our expression that we're trying to draw, and then draw it on SpongeBob or the character we're working on. So I feel like we're so used to it now. Some of us don't have the mirror, but we just pull from memory. But some of us still have that. What's that look like? Oh, okay, yeah, that's what I'm looking for, and then just draw it from the mirror.
Well, how about cross-cultural too? I see this golden statue. I've seen them on TV with people pretty excited. Where's that from? What does that represent?
This award I won on the show Casa Grandes, and we won it for the title sequence. But yeah, it's about a Mexican family. So growing up, there wasn't very much Mexican content on TV. So when I heard about this show, I knew I had to be part of it.
So it's what show did you get that on?
It's called Casa Grandes on
No,
Nickelodeon.
but I mean, in terms of the award, is it an Emmy?
It's an Emmy.
Oh,
yeah.
it's an Emmy, of course, silly me.
Right.
Yeah, I'll go to school for a little while. We'll grow up in Porterville, head off to Cal Arts, and get beer over SpongeBob, and you end up with an Emmy. There we
Yeah.
go. So in terms of cross-cultural, which is obviously Casa Grandes, so is there anything different about, some shows you see the Mexican grandmother chasing everybody around with a shoe and hitting them in the head and so forth. So is there something different that comes across culturally? So if I subtitled or did it over in English, would I understand the humor in the Casa Grandes?
I think so. I think as long as it's a good story, I think people can understand, because I feel like cultures are very similar. There's not much differences, I think. But I think it's cool. Like, I learned about Jewish traditions from Rugrats, and I thought that was amazing. So I got to learn a little bit about Jewish traditions. So I think Casa Grandes, you get to learn a little bit more about the Mexican culture. So I think that's cool that kids get to see that and experience those type of stories.
Yes. So what's next for you then? Retirement, pension?
I want to work on a movie. So I have a movie lined up that I'll probably be jumping on and working on.
So a cartoon movie then?
Cartoon movie, yeah.
So how do those do? I mean, now everybody's been out of the theater and everybody's used to Netflix on their phone, and
We'll still make it. Not sure about the distribution where it's going to be seen, but it'll be shown somewhere.
Yeah.
So,
And
hopefully
then
it does
do you
well.
have a team working with you?
Yeah, soon I'll start building the art team and then start building, my little art team. I'll be in charge of, all the art directions. So I'll start interviewing and building my team and start kicking butt.
Looking for those Cal Arts graduates?
Yeah, some of them.
That sounds great. Well, Miguel, thank you so much for sharing your Emmy, living in Ventura, and looking forward to your big screen cartoon debut there.
Cool.
And it looks like you bleed Dodger blue. Of course, I'm a Giants fan. I think we're still a game ahead. I haven't checked today, but.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm a 49er fan, so we have that.
Yeah,
in
49.
common.
I know you saw my jacket. I saw it try and walk off. I got it.
Yeah, so I'm a Dodgers fan. I started getting into baseball when I came to LA. So when I was younger, I used to, from Porterville, kind of closer to the Bay. So
Yes.
we still root for the 49ers. So people ask me all the time, why aren't you a Giants fan? I was like, I didn't really grow up on baseball. So when I came to LA, I got into baseball.
All right. Well, no disrespect to the Dodgers, but Giants. Sorry, 49ers. I think we're both good. So, Ventura, these quiet people with Emmys, we really need to start paying attention to just everybody that you're seeing. So, Ventura, we're going to be right back, but get moving. Oh, welcome back, Ventura. Welcome back to Get Moving TV. Again, it's a remarkable thing. You just talk to somebody on the side and find out that there's an incredible depth there. And Joe Metcalfe is with us today. And Joe and I met over health issues. And then came the rest of his life, what he does in the rest of the time when he's not spending 2 hours in my office. So we kind of want to go over kind of the arc of what happens in life, because we all start out here. Where were you born and your education, and then we'll get to Disney and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. I mean, let's start off. You can tell from my accent, I'm not exactly from here. I'm from the deep south of England, and grew up in a little town called Bournemouth, about 180,000 in the town. But there were a few also very cool people that came from there. Christian Bale, he actually grew up about 4 blocks away from us, and my mum and his mum still remain friends together. And at some point, you just discover what you want to do in life. And my moment came sitting in the theatre watching Amadeus, and I looked up at the screen watching Mozart writing for the stage, and I thought, you know what, today's stage is the screen. And I knew barely into double digits that that's what I was going to do with my life. So I didn't have any real formal training, but I just started writing music, and I started writing musicals, and the musicals turned into feature-length, full-length musicals. Next, I was invited to record at Abbey Road to do some television themes, and then that just led on to, I'm going through this quickly, putting an application in at USC and getting accepted by a wonderful guy called Buddy Baker, who was musical director at Disney for 29 years. And, and I hadn't had any formal training. But he just said, look, send in some manuscripts, we'll take a look at the manuscript and we'll review it in front of the committee. And I said, well, I have some with me, do you want to look at it? Right. And passed it over to him, and he turned 3 pages, and he looked at me and went, okay, Joseph, you're in. And I was like, well, what about the committee? And he leaned forward and he's like, I am the committee. And that was it. And that was, the reason why I wanted to do that wasn't necessarily because it was the academic institution, it was because of who was there. And the people who were there were the Jerry Goldsmiths, the Elmer Bernstein, Christopher Young, Ron Jones, who were the leaders. They're the leaders and founders in some cases of what film music has become today. And
I think they have buildings named after them on campus there.
There's a few, you could say. There's a few, but no, it just goes to show that when you've got a passion for something, you don't always have to look at what is the prescribed pathway to get there. You can just be yourself, pursue your passion, drive yourself, and nothing else gets in the way.
All right, well, I took piano, I think as 99% of America did, for about 2 or 3 lessons, and then the old lady just was so mean because you weren't practicing in between. And so did you start out on keyboard then, or how?
So yeah, I had exactly the same experience. I worked in it. In fact, a real funny story. We started off, my brother, sister, two sisters and a brother that were higher than me in the family, and they were all taking piano lessons. And my brother, I went up to him one day and said, "Dan," I said, "could you teach me how to play the piano?" And he went, "No." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because you're not 8 years old." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Well," he said, "you know, once you get to 8 years old, you can push any key, but until then, you can only push middle E and F on the piano. Otherwise, a big dragon's going to come out the top of the piano and eat you." And so I believed him. So for months, I just drove the family nuts, just pushing E and F next to middle C. And every now and again, my finger might slip off and hit a different key. And I was apologizing to the piano. And next thing, you know, they were all off at school one day. And I'm like, I want to see a dragon. I was bored. I was like, I want to see this dragon. So I sat on the edge of the piano seat and I made my pathway, my exit out of the living room into the kitchen. And I hit just any random note. And I ran with all my might and fully believing there was a dragon's gaping mouth chasing after me, and I, you know, looked behind me, and of course there was no dragon. 3 or 4 attempts later, sure enough, I had the courage to lift up the top of the piano, look inside, and that was it. I got unleashed, and I could suddenly hit every single key of the piano. And if they thought they were mad with E and F, every other key was now mine. And every once in a while, I'd like hit any random note, but then I'd hit something that sounded good, and I didn't realize then it was a chord. But I just and so I just hit random, bing, and I remember where that chord was, and I started like going up and down the keyboard until we ended up at a variety show one year, and the compere, as part of the script, was like, "Hey, look, I've run out of jokes. Does anybody want to come on stage, tell a story, tell a joke, play the piano, sing a song?" And of course, little 4-year-old me puts my hand up, and he's like, "Hey, come on up. What's your name?" "I'm Joe." He's like, "Okay, what are you going to do for us?" "I'm going to play the piano." And my mum in the audience like, "Oh, what on earth's going to happen?" I sat down, and just this one familiar tune, folk tune, came up, and I just sat down and I played it. First time in my life, note perfect, both hands. And there's my mum in the audience like, "Oh, that's my son, yeah." And it just transitioned from there, and it was unleashed. And I would say for the people who are being forced into the piano lessons, I give a message to the parents to say, don't force it, let it be discovered. Because it wasn't then until I was about 11 or 12 years old, my mother put me into piano lessons, which was with one of the most prestigious piano teachers in Britain at the time. He had his own show on BBC of how to learn the piano. And we get to the middle of some of the songs, and I'll be playing, and I'll be like, and then I'll go off on a tangent. And he's like, "Nah, that's not what the music says." And quite honestly, I'm terrible at sight reading. But I felt something. I was like, "But it sounds better like this," which is really arrogant for a little 11, 12-year-old boy to be saying to somebody whose music I was actually playing. So it was his own music. And I was like, "It sounds better like this." So after 4 weeks, he called me up. He said, "Look, you're wasting my time. You're wasting your mother's money. You're wasting your time. You're never going anywhere in music." And so that's the way it was. And I remember at that time having this emotion of wanting to cry and freedom at the same time. Crying for the failure of it, but freedom to say, I can do this the way that I want to do it. And that was from there on, I just started writing music and being unleashed into my own world until I ended up at USC.
So at high school then, or whatever the equivalent of high school is, were you involved in jazz bands or just?
Nope,
it was
not at all.
It was the Joe band.
I was writing music. I was writing musicals, and I had a great opportunity to be putting on little mini musicals, and you know, the opportunities that suddenly open up because of that replaced the need for a band. And in high school, in England, when you're 16 years old, you start to specialize. So I chose my 3 subjects because it was the safe path to go, which was chemistry, biology, math, and I was going to become a chiropractor because that was just the safe path to a career. 2 years later, realizing, you know, I'm showing up for I didn't show up for my finals because I just realized it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And I sacrificed those 2 years to say, no, I'm going to commit myself to the music. And that was it.
Well, you showed me something where you were just conducting an orchestra, so you have some knowledge of every instrument. It's not just a matter of the keyboard or the note or whatever. How did you educate yourself regarding an entire orchestra?
You listening is the first thing. You know, I was in that time when Amadeus came out, and I would start to put on, I got those new stereos where you put the cassette in and you could take the speakers off and put them either side, and I was listening to music in true stereo, and it's like, wow. And then one day I just dropped a Beethoven cassette in there, and it just penetrated me, and I was like, wow, what is that? And I recognized that's the violins, that's the oboe, those are the flutes, and And just listening and listening over again, that when it came time for me to start writing for those instruments, I could copy their colors. I was familiar with them and what they do and what they sounded like. So if I wanted a particular emotion, I'd turn to the oboe just to penetrate through everything else. And then other times, you want that triumphant side, and so you get like the trumpets blowing away, supported by the brass, and the French horns being the hero through the middle. You just became familiar by experience.
Did any of this make you anxious? I mean, it just all came naturally, and because I know you and I talked about jamming. I don't jam. You don't jam. Everybody we had at my house the other day they're all jammers. So does performance make you anxious, or?
I still don't consider myself a performer. I have
because
that.
Performers.
Music is collaborative. Music isn't about just one person. I don't care which superstar there is. There's people that support. Whether it's Johnny Cash and he's got a bassist, and you've just got people that have got to be there to support each other. And everybody has their place, everybody has their role, and I'm a big believer in the collaborative process. So I was really contented being able to write the music and then take it to the orchestra and put it in front of them and trust that they have years of experience that's going to make this sound phenomenal. Well,
it sounds like a musical sum. I mean, have you taken this very far?
Yeah, we've taken this. I'm going to tell two different things. One thing is there's an orchestra in Budapest that back in the year 2000 I founded the orchestra specifically to film scoring. And the reason why I want to touch on that before I go to the second thing is that was an opportunity that I was scoring a show in Budapest, a German-Hungarian co-pro, and realized they have 5 orchestras in Budapest, but they didn't have anybody for actually making music for film, putting the music into film and TV. And realizing that there's a huge number of independent films that could really be enhanced by live orchestra, we auditioned those musicians, we brought them into the same room, we trained them. And I still remember I was 27 years old and I stood in front of the orchestra for the first time. They looked at me as like, who's this crazy young boy standing in front of us? And I'm looking out, and average age is 40, 50 years old. And I was being very kind. I said, and I stood in front of it. It was a 50-piece orchestra. And through my translator, I said, look, I've been writing music for a little over half my life now. And yet each of you have probably been practicing your instruments for over 30 years. And I'm going to just narrow it to 30 years. So in front of me right now, I have 1,500 years of musical experience. And that just brings it right back to the core of what music is about. No one person is bigger than the music itself. So roll on several years later, we're moving along. I was given the chance to start a composers breakfast club up in Agora, Calabasas, Thousand Oaks area, which was a spin-off of one that exists in Malibu, run by Richard Gibbs, who was in Oingo Boingo with Danny Elfman, and he became a prolific film composer himself. And when the pandemic hit, I just realized, the very first temptation is like, all right, everybody, let's meet up on Zoom and let's start contacting music agents and filmmakers and big composers to come in and just speak to the group. And then it just hit me one day. It was like, we've been doing this for week after week. What about let's stop talking about music and let's start making music? And it started to attract the most incredible people. We had, Benny Rietveld, who's Santana's musical director and bassist. He came and joined in because he was a friend of Lisa's, who was in the group, and then Raphael Gale, who's a friend of Howard, who I think's been on your show. He works with Paul McCartney. He's Paul McCartney's keyboard guy. He's Leonard Cohen's drummer, and an incredible musician in many other areas. He starts coming in, and then Steve Shepard, Kenny G's mixing engineer, who came to LA to become a singer-songwriter, but found that safe job doing the mixing and engineering, just wanted to suddenly be unleashed. And then Jeff Carruthers, who's already this year he's been on #1 on the billboards through other artists, for his smooth jazz performances and creations. And we're starting to bring all these people together. And then we have young kids coming from England and from Argentina and Brazil and Canada. They're all joining us in this Zoom group. And I'm able to bring this, what we've now called the sum of all music, to collaborate together, to start to create new sounds and test ourselves musically, take ourselves to another level. And over time, we've just started to build a music library now, which 4 albums later, several hundred pieces of music later, we're able to say, look, let's take this gift and put it out to the world. Let's, to make it available to somebody who wants their YouTube video to have great backing music, to a feature film that wants to have incredible scores, but they're just looking for that special something. And so we've opened up this whole platform now called the Sum of All Music, or Sum of All Music, where people can just go and just license the music we're creating. And during this time, just the creation goes on. We've got some fabulous talent amongst us.
Well, we've got about a minute left here, but
Sure.
what does music do for you? I remember Pete Townsend was in a boat on the Thames while he was in school, and just the sound of the motor put him into a transcendental state. What did music do for you?
Music for me, music is the means of being able to transport emotion. Because it's, as me as a composer, what I have to do, if I'm going to write a scene for a film, I've got to say, okay, whose emotion do you want me to capture? And then I feel that emotion, and once I feel it, I become an actor. And I turn those emotions and the acting into musical notes. And then from those musical notes, I then give it to the musicians that when they play them, if I've been successful as a composer, the person who hears them feels that same emotion that I started off with. And I think that's what music is. It transports emotions. You've got big football games and the blaring music that gets people riled up. And you've got that soft melodies and the passionate music and stuff. When you want to feel emotion, we turn to music. And that's what it does.
Well, thank you, Joe, for the Sum of All Music. And Ventura, it's time for you to turn your music into passion, and vice versa too. It's time for you to get moving. And Calabasas Composers Club, come on, join up.